So, on to character now. I should probably start by defining what exactly I'm going to be talking about in this section. When I talk about character here, I'm going to be talking about how you build and develop the player character throughout the series. Now, due to the fact that the main consequences of character development show themselves primarily through combat in the series, I'll be dipping into discussion on that as well. So for The Witcher 1, you develop the character in the following ways: item crafting, equipping weapons, equipping armor, and leveling up. What bombs you can craft and what armors you can equip are done in a unique way for the first entry, so I'll start with them. Bombs are nearly completely neglected in the first Witcher, with there being only about 5 variants you can make and none of them particularly useful. They're just not well developed at all, and the only reason I can think for their inclusion is that they sometimes feature in some of the Witcher stories, so they're a complete novelty. The implementation of armor is also quite minimalistic, but in a good way.
There are basically only 4 armors in the whole game. The armorless state you're in for the first half hour, the standard and improved leather armor you're in for most of the game, and the Raven's armor that you get in the last half of the last act, but only if you've completed all the stages of the relevant quest. This means that the whole game is essentially designed around you having the standard or improved leather armor, which actually turns out to be a pretty good design decision.
The armor itself doesn't look half bad, and you never feel cheated by not having anything else to wear. And when the player realizes that they're not going to get a continuous stream of new armors to put on, they're going to naturally then engage with the other gameplay systems to compensate. And this is a good thing, because the other character systems themselves are worthy of the player's attention. These other systems are the crafting and equipable weapons you can get. Crafting, besides the already mentioned bombs, is all about oils and potions. The oils and potions can be used in and out of combat and are highly effective, with the potions providing you with many different kinds of buffs, from increased damage to healing to night vision, while the oils give damage boosts against different enemy types, and can be essential for dealing with wraiths, for instance. You get new recipes throughout the series from vendors, so I guess that's one thing to be thankful for about Salamander stealing the Witcher secrets. Both of these types of items can be used in the middle of combat, but take a short amount of time to apply, during which you are highly vulnerable and can be interrupted. The potential gain and loss from stopping your fighting to chug a swallow potion, for instance, is always an interesting decision in combat. This is due to how the combat itself plays, which is very like the Knights of the Old Republic gameplay-wise. You're mainly just moving around with WASD and then clicking on the enemy and watching some cool animations play. You can attack with 4 different weapons: the classic Witcher steel and silver swords, a heavy weapon, and a light weapon. The heavy and light weapon only have 1 combo each and are only useful in exceptional circumstances, if at all, while your mainstays, the silver and steel sword, both have multi-stage combos spread out over 3 different styles: fast, strong, and group. These styles are more effective against different kinds of opponents, with tanky monsters or guys being weakest to strong, and the smaller, quicker enemies being weak to fast style. You can craft or find better weapons for any of your 4 slots in the game, and unlike armor, you'll be swapping these out fairly regularly. Weapons can also be further enhanced by imprinting runes on them at a blacksmith, and it's generally worth doing so, as a fully enhanced weapon can be twice as good as its vanilla state. When it actually comes to attacking someone in The Witcher 1, you generally just click on them and sit there watching Geralt fight. But the game does shake things up a bit by adding what I can only describe as a rhythm game element, by making it so you can click near the end of the attack animation to launch into the next stage of your combo, which does significantly larger amounts of damage the more stages you get into. The other main avenue of attack is the magic signs. Now these are the stun, Ard, the damaging fire spell, Igni, the one that slows people down, Yrden, the damage shield, Quen, and Axii, which allows you to force enemies to fight against their friends. Quen is a very important sign as the series goes on, gameplay-wise, so I'll give a quick rundown of how it works in The Witcher 1.
Quen forms a shield around Geralt and allows him to do many actions without taking damage, such as walking around or taking a potion, but it disappears as soon as he attacks an enemy. It can be fairly useful, but you can achieve the same effect by just exploring the enemy's pathfinding or running away, or even tanking some damage while you chug a potion, so it's generally not used that much. But dealing good damage and surviving in combat can't really be achieved by just crafting and player skill. You need to actually engage with the leveling system if you want to be effective throughout the game. The Witcher 1 has a talent-based leveling up system that's fairly complex. You earn XP by killing monsters and doing general RPG stuff, like talking to people or completing quests, and hitting your XP target gets you these items called talents, along with a boost to your health and stamina. These talents then come in 3 varieties: bronze, silver, and gold. You then assign your given talents to one of 15 attributes, like intelligence or silver sword group style, to gain an ability or stat increase in that tree.
You can only start assigning silver talents when the tree has sufficient bronze talents in it, and the same is true for gold in relation to silver. The game largely dictates when you get these talents, so you're going to start the game getting only bronzes and finish it by getting only golds. This is essentially a subtle way of forcing the player to specialise somewhere along the line in a typical playthrough, as you can only build up what you put your bronze talents into. This means that someone who's built Geralt purely as a sword fighter all the way till chapter 5 can't just turn around and put the gold talents they're now earning into anything but sword fighting. It's all fairly interesting, and the level ups do produce a notable change in Geralt's actual functionality, particularly when you upgrade the sword attacks, since these then alter the actual combat animations Geralt does when he attacks. The Witcher 1's character system really is highly unique, and I find it difficult to give a good overall description of it. The best way to describe it really is to quote a remark for which I've already forgotten the source, so apologies in advance, but goes as follows. It's an RPG designed completely around one class, the Witcher. Now, this kind of system could be a big mistake if mishandled, because it could be really off-putting for a lot of people to force you to play, for instance, as a mage through an entire game. But what's great about how they design character in The Witcher is that you don't have to be shoehorned into any one approach. You can be a dabbler in all things, alchemy to sword fighting to magic. And there are well developed and rewarding gameplay systems to support whichever playstyle you go with. It's this complexity and variety that really makes The Witcher 1's character system great, but it also brings with it its most significant issue. It essentially suffers from bloat and could have been more polished or refined, particularly when we look at something like the uselessness of the heavy and light weapons or certain trees in the leveling up system. But besides that, it's overall a great character system. For The Witcher 2, you have bombs, alchemy, weapons, armor, leveling up, and for the only time in the series, traps. Bombs are anything but novel this time around and have many different recipes and a wide variety of gameplay effects, sometimes even being necessary for the completion of some quests. Armor has also been overhauled, with quite a few variants now available, whether they're crafted, purchased, or just found in the world. CD Projekt Red didn't half-ass this aspect either, with every armor piece being cosmetically unique and actively displayed on Geralt while also having significant stat effects for your characters. The presentation of weapons is similar to the presentation of armor, with a big variety that all have cosmetic effect and significant impact on gameplay. Weapons, and now armor, can be further enhanced by putting runes into them, this time not requiring a smith to do it, as you can just click and drag the runes from the menu. The Witcher 2 also features the inclusion of traps, which are craftable items you place on the ground that are triggered by enemies. They provide a variety of effects, and you can get their diagrams from quests and vendors, and they're fairly useful, really helping you to control whatever battlefield you find yourself on. Potions are also changed, as they are now only accessible from the meditation menu, which is itself only available outside combat. You line up the potions you want to take, and then they just give you their effect for a limited amount of time. Now, the potions and what effects they give are largely the same as they were in the first game, so I won't go over this aspect. But this new mechanic that doesn't allow you to have potions in combat anymore, I really believe in regards to combat is the worst design decision made in the game, for a variety of reasons. First off, while the mechanic isn't too flawed when you can tell there's danger ahead, like if you're about to enter a monster's lair, if you're unlucky enough to not be able to predict the future, you're going to get into a lot of tough fights unprepared, since you didn't have the foresight to chug a potion 5 minutes before you got ambushed. This flaw is made even worse by how a lot of fights can occur after having been in a fairly long conversation with people or watching a cutscene, and while you're chatting away, the potions you may have taken beforehand could have been completely used up. This then naturally leads to a save-scumming attitude in the player, where they'd be quick saving and quick loading constantly, due to them feeling that the game's design has made that kind of playstyle necessary. And they'd be right, it's just plain bad design.
Leveling up in The Witcher 2 is something else that's changed quite a bit. It's a lot simpler than the talent-based system from the first game. You're still collecting experience until you reach the amount needed for the next level, but this time around it's done largely from quests and very little is gotten from actually beating guys in combat. And when you get enough XP to reach a target, you level up. When you level up, you get one upgrade point that you can then spend on one of 4 trees: magic, melee, alchemy, or training, with your first few points being forced into the training tree. Most of the things that you can put points into only really change stat values and only add limited additional functionality to the game, which is in keeping with The Witcher 2's more streamlined and simpler general design aim. The one exception to this is the implementation of the conversation abilities: persuasion, intimidation, and the Axii sign. If you choose certain options in conversations, you upgrade these abilities, which can then be further used to gain interesting benefits in later conversations. There are more than a few instances throughout the game when these abilities come in handy, and overall, they're a nice addition to the game's otherwise fairly bland character system. I made a quick mention there of streamlining in the sequel, so I think it's appropriate now to highlight that The Witcher 2's combat takes the series in a more definitively action-oriented approach. It now plays sort of like a Batman Arkham game. Instead of one attack being one combo as it was in the first game, each attack is now one individual attack, with two variants, a light attack and a heavy slow attack. You then mix these together as you want to create your own combos. You can now also evade enemies by either rolling or blocking with your sword, and can further unlock a counter attack from the swordsmanship tree. You have stamina like the first game, with blocking and sign casting both each taking up one stamina point from your pool of remaining stamina, but rolling doesn't cost any stamina, and since it's a free action, it has big effects on how the game plays. Free rolling is one of the two main reasons why blocking isn't viable. The other main reason is the new design approach taken to the Quen sign, which now when cast will block one attack completely and stun the attacker, while Geralt carries on as if he hadn't been hit. The sign blocks any attack regardless of the damage, and can be further upgraded to block more attacks and can even deal damage to the attacker. This really stops blocking being at all useful as, for instance, if Geralt blocks, he'll take less damage, sure, but he's not actively doing any damage and is eating up stamina every time he blocks. Whereas if you use Quen, you take less damage and are dealing damage at the same time, while using up the same amount of stamina as if you were blocking. Quen and rolling basically make blocking obsolete, and since rolling is free, most players spend most of their time casting Quen and rolling around like a mad hedgehog. Ultimately, The Witcher 2's character system scales back a lot of the first game's elements, in order to deliver a more action-oriented and streamlined experience. Considering that this is the overall design aim of The Witcher 2, my conclusion is that ultimately it is a well-designed character system because it integrates so well with the rest of the game, barring a few notable exceptions such as how potions are handled, which is just idiotic. For The Witcher 3, you have the final implementations of bombs, alchemy, weapon and armor equipment, and of course leveling up. Traps are now gone for the third game, with the mandatory new feature being the inclusion of a ranged weapon, the crossbow. This new inclusion is a bit out of place, and it's just not of the same quality as the inclusion of traps in The Witcher 2. It honestly seems to have just been introduced mostly because Geralt looks cool with it, and they needed an underwater weapon for the player. Its implementation is fairly sparse, and there are only about 4 different ammo types and maybe 5 variants of the crossbow itself. You can specialise in its use in the character tree, sure, but it really doesn't amount to much. But hey, Geralt sure does pose good with it. The way The Witcher 3 deals with potions is a hybrid of the last 2 games' presentation of them. Potions can once again be consumed in combat like The Witcher 1, but in the style of The Witcher 2, the process has been highly streamlined, as they now take effect instantly with no animation. You don't even need to craft a certain amount of them. You just make the one potion and then meditate whenever you want to top it up. It's all very, very convenient. The Witcher 3 generally maintains the model of combat put forward by The Witcher 2, so from a design perspective there isn't too much to say that I haven't already said. However, they play significantly differently, and I'll get into their differences in the combat section later. Now, in keeping with this open world design, The Witcher 3 features tons and tons of armor and weapons out there to find and equip. It really is quite strange just how loot mad the third game is, considering how level-headed the first game was towards equipment. But it makes sense, as The Witcher 3's design goal is to create this huge, massive open world, and they naturally had to fill it with something interesting to keep the player ticking over. Leveling up is done very similarly to The Witcher 2, with XP coming mostly from quests, and when you hit the XP target you get 1 talent point you can spend in a certain tree. Once again there are 4 trees, one for combat, one for magic, one for alchemy, and a sort of a general one at the end. Similar to The Witcher 2, there's been a lot of streamlining, and most of the tree now is just mild stat increases here and there, with the only additional functionality coming from the magic tree. In the magic tree, you can unlock an alternate fire mode for every sign, and even get the ability to use Axii sign in conversations, which like The Witcher 2 unlocks unique new options. But this is basically it for added functionality, and besides this all you're going to be doing is plus 5% to critical chance or plus 2% to attack damage. There is, however, a really frustrating flaw to do with The Witcher's leveling system, and that's the leveling restrictions, which show themselves in 2 ways: enemy levels and equipment levels. Leveling restrictions in terms of enemy levels can become hugely annoying, as higher level enemies are typically just stat inflated old ones. Yes, you may have killed hundreds of identical drowners to this one on Skellige, but this one is 10 levels higher than you, and does 10 times more damage and takes 10 times less, purely because of this number next to their health bar. It can be highly frustrating in the reverse too, as you can also one-hit kill once interesting or exciting enemies if you stray back into low level areas. Now, in fairness to CD Projekt Red, this isn't a problem to anyone who follows the main quest regularly and gets the XP dumps that come with the main quest, but it becomes hugely apparent once you step off the beaten track into side quests, which you're probably going to do as this is an open world game. Equipment restrictions in terms of leveling are just as annoying. The best example to show this are the Witcher gear quests, where you're gathering recipes to make specialist Witcher armors and weapons that can be upgraded the more recipes you get. So you do the quest to get the recipe, which again to CD Projekt's Red credit are always interesting, and gather all the necessary materials and head all the way to a smith to craft them, and lo and behold, you're not high enough level to equip them. Why the hell can't the player use a fucking sword they just made purely because they haven't gathered enough XP yet? Sure, it might be overpowered, but shouldn't you reward the player who went out of their way to get something like a master-crafted Skull of the Bear silver sword with something overpowered? It's just a frustrating design decision that punishes the player for engaging in the kind of exploration encouraged by the rest of the game's design. We can see in The Witcher 3's character system the completion of the series' shift to a more action-oriented approach started with The Witcher 2. You can nearly call The Witcher 3 an action game with stats, with the RPG elements being an afterthought more than anything else. Now, while this may not delight fans of the first game, or RPGs in general, just like The Witcher 2, the character system is characteristic of the game's overall design aim, in this case, creating a character system suited for an open-world game that is also approachable for newcomers to the series. So, I think that, despite a few notable flaws like the leveling restrictions, it does hit its intended mark quite well and can be regarded as well designed. Now, whether it should have been aiming for that mark in the first place is another question. Ultimately, we can see a stark difference between The Witcher 1's character system and the latter two entries' character systems. While The Witcher 1 is a game that is arguably built around this character system, we can see that The Witcher 2 and 3 instead force their character system to conform to the overall game they want to make. In The Witcher 1, you gathered potion ingredients, found a place at a friend's house or inn to meditate, and then prepared your chosen potions individually, as an actual Witcher might. In The Witcher 3, however, you collect your ingredients, open up the potion menu, click create, and bam, instant potion, with unlimited refills from then on. However, this is a difference in style, not quality, and all three systems do integrate well into their respective entries, and, despite a few notable missteps, must therefore all be concluded as largely well designed.